Well, welcome everyone. It is now 3 p.m. so we can go ahead and get started. My name is Sierra King and I am the Admissions and Program Services Manager for the Data Incubator, and we are a fellowship, scholarship, and placement company. We have promised you all an excellent info session today that will be led by one of our instructors, Michael Cullen. Michael will link a notebook in the chat that we'll be using during his demonstration, so please make sure you have access to that and can follow along. To start things off, I would like to give a quick overview of our program and everything that we do at the Data Incubator, and then Michael will jump in for our live demonstration. And we'll save some time for questions at the end. So please place all of your questions in the Q&A section and we will answer them at the end of our presentation. As a reminder, our session is an hour long today, so if we don't get to all of your questions, please feel free to email us at admissions@thedataincubator.com and we will be happy to help you. So moving on. So what does the Data Incubator offer? The Data Incubator focuses on training people to become data scientists. Why is that important? It is really because data scientists have the ability to work with the latest tools on unstructured and structured data. This is a big need in the world right now. We have companies in a ton of different industries, ranging from tech to finance to retail and healthcare and many more. Every company has data and wants to use the data to drive value for them. So what makes the Data Incubator different? There are a lot of other data science programs out there. So what do we do at the Data Incubator that's a bit different from those? Well, what we found is when you're looking at training, there are really two types, one being fast-paced and efficient, and the other slower and focusing on understanding and completion rates. University is one example of the latter, where you'll receive a more detailed understanding, but with a lot more time invested. On-the-job training is usually very quick and efficient, but maybe you're not fully understanding everything that you're doing. So we've taken all of those aspects and combined them together to find a great middle ground for training. Our program is fast-paced. You walk out of the program knowing a lot about data science and real-world business applications, and with a deeper understanding as you get from university. All of our instructors are PhD and master holders and have completed the program and know how to provide that in-depth training that you are looking for. So a little bit more about our fellowship program. It's not your average program. It is intense. That is that fast-paced schedule I was speaking to earlier. It is 9 to 5, Monday through Friday for 8 full weeks. It's thorough. Each week focuses on a different data science tool or approach. In addition to our lectures, we have students participate in hands-on practice. We really believe in fostering an interactive learning environment, and each week you'll be working on a mini project that focuses on that data science tool that you are studying. Some topics that we cover are TensorFlow, machine learning, Spark, and data visualization, just to name a few. Additionally, our program is very collaborative. We want students not only to work with their colleagues and instructors, but also be able to work on presenting to companies. Part of our program is working on a capstone project that you have the opportunity to present to our hiring partner network. You'll get feedback on how to present, how to create a capstone with a clear business objective, and a great portfolio piece to add when you're interviewing with companies. Our program is also forward-thinking. We have career coaches that help you with the career aspect of becoming a data scientist. So not only that technical training on how to become a data scientist, but getting a job in that field. That involves work with your resume, cover letter, interview skills, and negotiation. And to help connect our students with our hiring partners, we host virtual network events. We do partner panels where companies will come in and talk about what it looks like to work at a company and discuss problems that they're currently trying to solve. We also host capstone showcases where students have the opportunity to present their capstone directly to our hiring partners. In addition to this, we are excited to announce our new part-time program. It will last 20 weeks. It takes place in the evenings. There will be Monday and Thursday from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern time, with office hours held weekly as well. It allows you to work full-time while advancing your skills as a data scientist, and it offers the same curriculum and career services as our full-time program, but at a slower pace. So a little bit, here's an overview of our curriculum. We do also have a more detailed overview, so if you email us at admissions@thedataincubator.com, we would be happy to send you that so you can review it. It'll go over the weekly project and topics you'll be covering, as well as the prerequisites needed. So if you look at this, this is just the breakdown between the full-time and part-time program. And again, please email us and we are happy to send this to you. So we admit 2 types of students into our program. Fellows are offered tuition-free scholarships, and we offer a limited number of these scholarships to highly qualified candidates. I will say that that applies to our full-time program. Fellows are expected to leave any current employment to attend our programs and are expected to interview exclusively with our hiring partners. Scholars will pay tuition to participate in our program. They are not required to interview exclusively with our hiring partner network and may maintain their current employment. Scholars will have the same access to curriculum, resources, and tools as our fellow students. So that is just a little bit about our program. I will now pass off to Michael to lead you through our live data science demo, and then I will come back on at the end to help answer any questions.
All right, thanks so much, Sierra. And I'll send these links in the chat one more time. So everybody, if you look in the chat, I have a link here to a GitHub repository and to a link, like a Binder Hub link that opens up a notebook server from that repository. So go ahead and definitely probably load up that Binder one, because that's going to be the fastest way to follow along. You can run the notebooks right in your browser. But let me switch my screen over. So if you click that Binder link, you will see eventually something like this, but initially you'll see a little loading screen that looks like this. And while this is happening, again, this is just on my Binder, basically a little kind of short-term Jupyter notebook server is just going to be loading up for you that you can follow along. That'll take you, of course, to your typical Jupyter notebook file tree, and we're going to be going through some of these things. But before we do that, I want to just go take a look at the repo really quickly, just an overview of what we're going to be talking about, and it's a little bit of motivation for it. So as you are applying to the fellowship, and really in the work you would be doing, all the time as a data scientist, you have to, work on things like case studies or proof of concepts of, particular projects you're working on, spinning up quick prototypes of things. But in particular with the fellowship, you're working on this capstone project. And so I just want to talk a little bit about some of the tools you might use to present results from the capstone project without too much overhead and, let's say, developing like your own web app or something like that. And so I want to talk about this app called Voila. This piece of software called Voila that takes a Jupyter notebook and turns it into a standalone app that you can run. And so we'll be seeing all of this kind of in practice with some real example and kind of like a, well, not exactly a real data set, kind of a toy data set. But we'll see kind of what this looks like for us in just a second. But I just want to address like some of the things that Voila compares to. So you have perhaps made a Jupyter notebook and shared it with someone on GitHub before. You end up seeing something like this. So I have the notebook we're going to be running. If I open that on GitHub, okay, well, I can render the notebook. I can kind of see some stuff. I can't run any of this code, which is not ideal. But it can be okay. But at the same time, we have these often really big blocks of code. It doesn't really, promote or enforce good kind of presentation organization on our end. So I like to push people away from this. Sharing a notebook just on GitHub is great if you are just working with another data scientist and they just need to take a look at something really quick. But it's not really how you would prepare a report, a presentation, or some kind of dashboard or app for somebody else to use. We also have things like, okay, well, I could take a notebook and share it on Binder. So now we're something like here, which we'll be getting started with in just a second. And so everything I made in this notebook, you can run as a Jupyter notebook. You can make new cells. You can run new code in it. And that's great in some cases, such as like the demo we're doing right now. But it's not ideal if I'm making something that should be some visuals for someone who's in the marketing department, and they don't want to look at all this code. They don't want to run this the way that I do. So it's not always the best fit. And then we have things that are a little bit more built out. things like Streamlit, which is a wonderful piece of software for building dashboards pretty easily. Recommend taking a look at it, not really the focus for today. And then of course, building something from scratch with like a web framework like Flask or Django or Tornado or something. And with these, the thing that's, we start having more overhead, right? We have to do all this additional development work. Whereas with Voila, as we're going to see, really it's directly integrated into the way that we already kind of do our initial exploratory proof of concept work just in a Jupyter notebook. And so that's kind of why we're here. And again, this will, set you up for a good format to present kind of initial exploratory results as you are, applying, putting together a capstone project proposal, or if you're in the fellowship and you're putting a final deliverable, you might even use Voila. Although I actually might push you in that case towards something like Streamlit. But this is a great, again, starting point for kind of something you can show someone else. So all that being said, let's go to our notebook server. You should see something like this. I think if you open it on Binder, you won't have that first data directory at first. But we can open up this notebook, 01 Voila example. I'm going to close a few tabs here. And if you're not too familiar with Jupyter Notebooks, you're looking at one right now. We have interactive blocks of Python code, can be other languages as well. We have Markdown text and everything else you can do in Markdown. And this is kind of the just really like ubiquitous, I would say, tool that data scientists and like coding kind of analysts use all the time. So as we go through this, be sure to run these blocks of code if you want to follow along. I typically do this by holding Shift and pressing Enter. As you can see, this one is running right now. That star means it's running. That 2 means it was the second thing that was run. You can also hit this button here for run. You can also do, I don't know, cell and run, but I would just probably Shift, Enter, or that button. But I'm going to toggle those things away so I can zoom in a little more. So I'm just running some imports, bringing in some of the typical software we'll be using. I won't be able to go through all the code that kind of generates these plots because I want to keep it high level, but it's certainly stuff you can review later if you download the notebooks from GitHub. So again, we're using Voila today, and this turns Jupyter Notebooks into standalone web applications. The difference here from running something just like a notebook on Binder, like we're doing right now, is that we can't make our own execute requests from the front end. So I can't put in arbitrary code. If I'm on a Voila app that someone sent me, I can't add this new thing that does, 1 + 4 = 5 or whatever it might be. It also has this strip source option. So it takes out these input cells, and you don't see these when you see the actual app. Now, if you want to see some of the code, you can. But again, we're thinking about this is something we're presenting probably to someone else who's not a data scientist. And so they don't need to look at our hundreds and hundreds of lines of code. And again, some of those alternatives, I'm not going to go through line by line, but it gives you more interactivity than just a static notebook file. It's not so interactive as just the notebook we're looking at right now. And it's going to be a lot faster to put together than things in Streamlit or Flask because it's basically just the notebook you're already making. These are all great in their own settings, but we're talking again about like really proof of concept, sending something to somebody else. So we'll do a little kind of case study here, a little real world data set. This is, I think it's probably zoomed in that way. There we go. Sorry about that. And so we're looking at, and so I'm sorry, this should say ad clicks, but we have a kind of toy data set here that has ads being shown on some website and a little bit of information about people who were shown those ads and whether or not they clicked. And we're working on a little dashboard for our marketing team. Who are our users? Which of them are clicking on ads? Who should we be targeting? Which ads might be, should we be promoting more? All these kinds of questions. And we want to help them explore this with some interactive visualizations. And we'll even do a little bit of machine learning here. So our data set we're using, I'm just pulling from GitHub. It's going to look like this. This just takes us to it. It's just kind of, again, like a toy data set. It's pretty small. It's just 1,000 rows. It's not real data, but it's just a nice kind of, easy to access thing that we can all use. So we have a little bit of information about our users, how much time they spend on the site, how much time they spend online, the topic line for the ad, city, gender, country, timestamp, whether or not they clicked. And I have also made this little additional column that says, let's take this from 0 to 1 and let's actually make it some text so it's a little bit nicer. And let's just jump right into some of the visualizations we can do. So the first of these, I want to do some density plots, kind of like histograms, just a little bit smoother. So I'm going to run this. These are just being made in matplotlib. Again, unfortunately, don't have time to go through all of the code, how I'm producing these, but this just tells us a little bit about the distributions of our features, right? So we can see, for instance, that, all right, well, our users seem like they're mostly around 30, but we have a decently heavy tail over here, some older users. We can see kind of with the income, the time on site, the time online. Interestingly, with something like the internet usage, it kind of seems bimodal. There's maybe two different trends or two different sort of, well, modes that we're observing, right? Some people who spend around 2 hours, some people who spend around 3 and let's say 3/4 of an hour. This is not necessarily the kind of plot you'd want to show to somebody in marketing because this doesn't maybe tell them as much, but it might help you get a better idea of what's going to be useful for you as you start doing further exploration or some modeling. So we'll actually be dropping this one from later. But okay, let's, looks like we have some kind of information in age, we have some trends going on with internet usage. Let's kind of see what else we can sort of peel out and what that does for our advertisement click rate. And I'm actually going to get interactive with some of these plots. I'm going to be using a package called Altair. This links you to the example gallery and also to the documentation for Altair. I wouldn't say it's the best visualization library, not the #1 library I like to reach for, but there are a lot of really nice advantages. It's really fast to make these linked visualizations. We'll see those in a little while. And in fact, because it creates JavaScript graphs just run in D3, we actually don't need to do this in Voila. I can make an Altair chart interactive and I could just put it in static HTML, like on GitHub pages. But that's a conversation for another day. I'd like to just demonstrate, so I'm going to take some of these. First, let's just look at the click rate kind of over the couple of different months we have in our data. And there's not really any obvious trends, kind of hovering around 50%. Definitely a very, we can kind of tell this is not a real data set because if 50% of people were clicking on our ads, we would be doing unbelievably well. But that's neither here nor there. So we've just kind of put this chart together showing, all right, well, maybe we don't have a huge obvious temporal effect, so maybe we'll not worry about it too much for now. So what else do we know? Well, about how old people are or how much time they spend on the site every day. What does that do for our click rate? And to investigate sort of this three-way interaction, we're going to make a linked pair of charts. So what do I mean by linked? Well, I can select something in one chart and it modifies the other one as well. And let's just take a look at that. Again, I'm making this Altair chart. I can't go through all of this code, but effectively, I'm creating each of these two different charts. I'm adding some selectors to them, and I'm saying that when I make a selection over here, it changes it over here. And what I see now with orange as when people have clicked, with gray as when people have been shown an ad and not clicked, that some interesting things happen, right? So it looks like as our users are older, the click rate is higher. And it looks like, maybe the overall number of clicks doesn't change that much by age, but the rate does. So with younger users, we have a lot more people who are not clicking, but we have a lot more people in general. So the number of clicks is actually kind of steady. We also see that for people who use the site more and more and more, that they don't really click as often. And there's a very sharp one of these around 70 minutes per day on the site. What's really interesting though is I can say, all right, well, who are these people that are spending all this time on the site and that are not clicking? And so I can select this, and over here I actually see that that is by and large, those are younger users who are on there for a long time and they're not clicking. So similarly, I could say, all right, well, how much time are older users spending on the site? Generally a shorter amount of time, and they're clicking a lot. I can slide this over. So, as I'm getting younger, I'm spending more time on the site and I'm clicking less and less. So that's this linked plot. We made it with just a few lines of code. And again, we can embed it in actually static HTML. So last thing I'll note too is that you'll notice that like the titles for these charts are not something like age versus count versus this other thing. We actually have kind of like a takeaway as the title, something I would recommend. There's a story here. That story actually should be made explicit. People want to see it. Now, why is that useful? Let's compare that to kind of a more static chart that shows those three features against each other. We can kind of see something here. So I have the time spent on site. This histogram is split up by colors. So I have the, then the colors for the users. And it does kind of look like the ones who spend a lot more time on the site are going younger, but it's harder to see this right away. So those link charts can be very useful. Again, Altair is great for that. Some other things I might look at, let's compare that temporal effect back to the, our age back to our kind of temporal effect with months. Nothing immediately jumps out. I don't want to spend too much time talking about that, just noting that there are a lot of different charts that we can make pretty quickly here. And then the last thing I want to show before I start actually getting into the voila implementation is we're just going to do a little bit of topic modeling. In our data frame, we had these add topic lines, right? Things like, I don't know, these kind of fun nonsense tech phrases that are probably completely fake. Monitored, national standardization, organic bottom line service desk, nonsense. But we might say, all right, well, can I actually get some basic, main themes out of these? Maybe some of them correspond to cloud services or to optimization, and maybe some of those are more popular, maybe more popular with different users. And so I'm going to do some topic modeling to learn and extract some patterns from there. I'm going to use something called non-negative matrix factorization. Would love to talk all day about what that is and how it works, but we are a little pressed for time. But I'm going to do that using scikit-learn. It's kind of the main library you use to do pretty much most relatively more straightforward data science, well, machine learning kind of data science tasks in Python. Scikit-learn. So I'm bringing that in. We're going to do a little bit of just kind of lightweight natural language processing. And so to do that, I'm just going to create some vectorized kind of matrix of our words. Can't really talk about that too much either. Going to fit my NMF model. I'm going to have 3 different topics here. And I'm going to figure out for each of those topics, each one of our ads will correspond to topic 0, 1, or 2. And I'm adding that into my data frame. I'm going to use that later. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run this cell. It's going to say, all right, give me all of the sort of components of that model. Combine those with all the different words we saw. And let's look at the top 5 words that characterize each topic in our model. And I've actually put those together into this little piece of kind of HTML that gets built up and displayed so that we actually get these nice little columns. And it says, all right, our first topic is the biggest one. These are kind of our first 5 words: customer, solution, oriented. Topic 2, structure, interface, user. So we can kind of see a little bit of a difference here. And topic 3, configurable, desk, thinking, secured. These aren't, it's not super easy to parse out how all of these things differ from each other, but the model has done that for us. And maybe we can say they look sort of different. Maybe they don't look that different, but certainly if we had more data, if it was more real and representative and not this tiny data set, maybe we'd get something a little bit more interesting out of this. But this lets us now ask the following question. Maybe it's the case that nobody cares about topic 2. Nobody cares about topic 3. So what's the click rate within those topics? And so now that I've created this, now that I've added that as a new column to the data frame, we can make another plot. And so let's look now at our clicks. We'll look at just the click rate across each topic. They're actually pretty much all at 50%. We'll look at the counts by age. Now, not really any super interesting, super obvious patterns jumping out here. Looks like roughly a pretty similar distribution. I don't have any like kind of big eureka moments, any big epiphanies coming from this, but it's just to show that now we can, again, just keep drilling down. We have these kind of this new model we're using, getting the topics, and now we're relating that back to the metric we actually care about. If we had more topics, if we had more data, if that data was real, if we had more text to work with, we'd probably start getting something a lot more relevant out of this. But given that this is synthetic data, these are probably all just generated completely randomly, and so we're not really going to see anything very interesting. But so this is our notebook. We've put together a couple of plots that we'd like to show somebody. We've put together a couple of, just showing what the data looks like that we'd like to show somebody. But we don't want to send someone this whole notebook because now they're scrolling through all of this kind of mumbo jumbo. And, if I'm not a data scientist or if I'm not familiar with Altair, then I see this and my eyes start glazing over and I'm like, I don't want to deal with this, but I do want to deal with this. And so this is where Voila comes in. And I'll demonstrate first what it looks like, and then we'll talk a little bit more about sending someone a Voila or how we would actually deploy this in a more realistic setting. But if we have Voila installed in our environment, and this environment does, one simple thing we can do is we can go to the URL up here. And so we have our server, that's everything up to notebooks. And the notebook here, we're going to replace that. So now I'm going to say /voila/render. And when I do that, this is what you actually see. This is a Voila app. It's going to execute those cells. So it still runs all the code, just like a notebook. But it's going to display to us something that is very cleaned up. There is none of the code visible anymore. We still have all that text that I kind of wrote for ultimately you guys. But then we just have, kind of our data frame. We have our plots. We have our interactive ones. And again, these are still interactive. We can still use these, but we just don't have to look at all that code. And all of that was done automatically for us. Some issues with displaying that HTML. I think I actually sorted that out in the other notebook I'm going to demonstrate. So we'll actually circle back to that. So that was a quick overview, kind of a case study that we were playing around with, thinking about how we can use our features or modifying some of our features to get at a metric we really care about. For us, that's the click rate. We did even a little bit of machine learning. We did some interactive plots. But what we're really looking at, is how did we get this Voila app? How can we make it better? How can we make it faster? So one thing you'll notice, I mentioned that all of the code has to run when I start a Voila app. So I'm saying executing all 27 cells. That means that every single time we run this, we have to load in the data, process the data, generate the plots, train the machine learning model, make predictions using the machine learning model, all these different things. And realistically, if you're serving someone a dashboard, they should not have to wait for all that stuff every time. And so it's going to be a much better workflow in the future to split these things up into separate services. I'm doing that here with just 2 different notebooks. But I just want to demonstrate the how and why we do that. So notebook number 2, O2 pre-process, it's going to look like this. I'm going to do a really quick run through of what's going on here. Notice that I have commented out some of these imports. We're not using really any of the displays or plotting here. I'm just going to take in the data. I'm going to do the processing I need to do, and I'm going to save that data somewhere else so that another app can use it. So I'm loading it in just like before. I'm not generating those plots. I'm still doing my topic modeling. I'm making that new column in the data. I'm going to save that. I'm making the sort of top 5 words that I'm using kind of in the visualization. But I'm not actually displaying them here because this is sort of something we would do on the back end. And once I've run everything in this notebook, we now have this little data directory. It has a few things in it. And these are things that are actually going to be used by our third notebook here, which Voila pre-processed, which I'm just going to change right now. Again, this is not the only way you would do this sort of thing, but because I wanted to give us an interactive environment for this, if you're working in Jupyter Notebook, this is what it looks like. It's actually not how you would deploy to somebody else. But we'll change that to Voila render, and we'll see what happens now. So now we're executing far fewer cells, and it was a lot faster. And again, that's because we weren't doing as much computation ahead of time. I've gotten rid of some of the other text that was not really for our hypothetical end user. It was really more for demoing to all of you. So some of the other things look a little bit different too. But generally, we still have those same plots. They're still interactive. Still have some takeaways, some more plots, some more plots. We've got our top 3 topics. We've got our visualizations from there. And again, all of this, we actually just made the way we would kind of typically make a Jupyter notebook, right? We really just did this and we generated some plots. It was relatively straightforward. I didn't have to convert my work into a bunch of scripts that would run in a Flask app or switch from this plotting library to one that was more amenable for Streamlit or Dash or anything like that. Still had interactivity, still could actually run Python code, meaning I don't have to totally automate everything or totally cache everything right away. There's a lot more benefits we get from kind of this server being able to run that Python code on the back end. I don't want to get into all those use cases right now, but rather just kind of to wrap things up with just sort of what we've done here. So again, we used Voila to turn a notebook, this first one that we built with our own work in it, to turn that into a standalone app that kind of looks like this. We used Altair to make some nice interactive charts. We used a little bit of scikit-learn to figure out the top 3 topics in the sort of subject lines. Where is it? That's frustrating. I guess I changed that back to a notebook. In our ads, right? And again, we split those into 2 different notebooks so that we could have one thing kind of doing the heavy lifting and another thing that becomes the sort of deliverable for our end user, making this a lot faster but still rich and interactive. So as you are working on applications, working on a capstone project proposal, you're doing some exploratory analysis and you want to share some results, you might find it very, very useful to put something together actually maybe more in this format, where we still have more interactivity. It doesn't look like I'm just looking at someone's scratch work, but rather it's kind of a little bit closer to a formalized report. But it's really something that has benefits all over the place. Versus, again, having to make something from scratch with Flask or something. This is basically just part of your Jupyter workflow. I want to make one last note. I know I've kind of done a lot very quickly here, but I did say that we did this on Binder so that you can see the notebooks and you can see the app. Typically, if you want to share like a Voila app with someone, you want to do that so that they don't have to use like a Jupyter server. And so you might, and Voila has instructions for this, so I don't want to go into them too much, but in the documentation for Voila, they certainly mentioned that you can deploy this on Binder, which is what we've done, just for a really, really quick prototype. But if we want to put something a little bit more polished, we might put it on Heroku, for instance, which is a platform that makes it very, very easy to deploy a free web app. We can do this with Flask, we can do it with Voila, all sorts of different things, but it's really a few very short steps to do it with Heroku. And so again, I would say it's a great approach for putting together kind of a first pass of a capstone project. All right, that was a lot very quickly. We will have some time for questions after Sierra kind of finishes up the slides and the rest of that discussion. So thanks everybody. Hopefully this was instructive. Hopefully you saw some cool kind of data science case studies and some cool tools that we can make useful as well. So all that being said, thank you everyone. And I'm going to turn things back over to Sierra.
Thank you. I was having some difficulty getting unmuted there. So let me share my screen, and thanks again, Michael, for that demo. And then also, if someone could give me access to share my screen, it's saying that it's disabled for some reason. I don't know, Sarah, if you can hear me, would you be able to give me access to share my screen again?
Yeah, you should be able to try now.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, just picking up where we left off, a little bit about our employment rates, and then we'll go into where some of our scholars that have graduated from our program are now. So a big part of our program that we really pride ourselves in is helping our students not only grasp data science concepts, but also getting placed in that field. So you'll see 97% of the students that go through our program are currently employed outside of academia, and 82% are employed within 6 months of completing the program. Those are really great numbers. We are really proud of those numbers and have worked hard for them. That's part of the challenge, not only learning the content, but being able to transition into a data science role. And that's where our program stands out, because we help you to do both. So where are our graduates now? Where are they working and what are they doing? Working in 55 different industries. Some of the most common industries we see are computer software, internet IT, financial services, and biotech. Some of the typical job titles we see are data scientist, data analyst, research scientist, software developer, and product manager. These titles and roles will vary depending on the company and industry, but these are some of the roles that we have placed in the past. Here is a short list of some of our hiring partners. You are also able to email us at admissions@thedataincubator.com for a more detailed list of hiring partners as well. We frequently are asked about our financial offerings and if we have any, and the answer is yes, we do. Especially during times like these, it's hard because people may have extra time to participate in our program, but limited cash flow. So we want to help you with that. We have partnered with Leaf to provide an income sharing agreement. It's great. You can participate in the program with just the deposit down, and you won't be required to make any payment until you've graduated and are working and earning more than $40,000 annually. We also provide loans through Skills Fund. And then in addition to that, we still also offers loans for international students. We know we have students who participate in our program that do not have US Social Security numbers and still can assist you with the financing. So some important dates, where are we right now? Well, we run 4 cohorts a year, and we are actually starting our winter cohort in mid-January, but our application is currently open for our spring cohort. Our spring cohort will run from April 5th through May 28th, and our part-time program will run April 5th through August 20th. As I mentioned earlier, the full-time cohort is 8 weeks long, and the part-time cohort is 20 weeks long. Some specifics about the application: we ask that you submit your application by January 15th. You'll then have 72 hours to complete the coding challenge from the time that you open it, and the challenge deadline is January 18th. You cannot complete the challenge unless you submit the application. Just in general, I recommend you complete the application and challenge sooner rather than later to avoid any technical issues, as we are unable to reopen the application or the challenge after that deadline. Those dates are for our early admissions. We also do a regular admissions cycle after early admissions. What's the difference between the two? Well, we really evaluate applicants on a first come, first served basis. So if you want a better chance of getting a fellow spot or knowing earlier if you've been accepted into the program to secure financing, I absolutely recommend applying for the early admissions application. If you're interested in applying, which I hope that you are, you can go to thedataincubator.com/apply to submit your application. If you have any questions about your specific situation, the presentation, or going through our application process, please reach out to us at admissions@thedataincubator.com, and we'd be happy to answer your questions. At this point, we'll open it up to any questions. I have anything in the Q&A. We are happy to answer those now. So I will just pause for a moment and see if we have any questions come through. I did see something in the chat earlier. I'm not sure if it was answered. So let me see if I pulled it up. It was asking where you can find out more about our part-time program. And you can email us at admissions@thedataincubator.com, and we are happy to go over that with you. And then also on our Data Incubator website, there is now a page that is dedicated to our part-time program. So it says, I was a little late for the demo. Is there a way to get access to the recording? Yes, we will. We do record the session, and we will provide the recording to all of our attendees. So are the scholarships for part-time fellowships? So the scholarship, the full tuition fellow scholarship, will only apply to our full-time program. It does not apply to our part-time program. This question is for Michael. It says, can Michael talk a little bit about building end-to-end ML pipelines, in particular the case of the batch and real-time data ingestion?
Certainly something I'd love to talk about. I would say it's like that's a very in-depth conversation, and probably not something that we have a lot of time for today. But you know, otherwise, like definitely a very meaningful topic, just outside the scope for today.
Another question says, since the spring 2020 cohort will be online, will the tuition rate be the online rate? Yes, it will be the online rate. Another question for Michael. It looks like your example in marketing, does your program also relate to scientific applications of data science?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that was just kind of a limited toy example that I was using. And it was a very, very simple, like the technical component of it was super simple. So I'll say like two things to that. First is that we cover a much more broad range of real world topics with real world data sets in the program. And the second, that we get a lot more in depth to, you know, much more sophisticated techniques in a lot more detail.
Another question I see is, could you share some comp details that fellows were able to get after the program? So on average, we were placing our students anywhere from $80,000 to $130,000. Of course, that can vary. It depends on the company and the roles available at the time, but that is pretty much our standard average placement. Any other questions? Oh, I see some in the chat. Let's see. For part-time, is it in person or online? It is online as well. So you will have those two meetings in the evening times weekly, and it will be hosted via Zoom. So can you list the cost again? The cost to attend online, the program tuition is $10,000. And then depending on which option you apply for, either early admissions or regular admissions, there are some additional cash discounts depending if you do direct payment. Let's see, can you please brief us about fellowship selection criteria and hiring partners offer employment to TDI alumni living outside of the US? So I'd be happy to go over that with you in a little bit more detail when we have some more time. So if you would email us at admissions@thedataincubator, then we can go over that with you as well. how can Canadian residents apply for the full-time, part-time program? You are able to apply online. There is no distinction there. And so we do have students that are participating internationally. Let me check in I was reading the chat, but let's see the Q&A. So the next question I see is, what is the difference between the data science courses offered at Pragmatic Institute and the data science fellowship? I would say that it's definitely a thorough in-depth training, and then you'll end the program with that certificate, and then also you'll receive that career training as well. So we will do weekly career search lectures with you to assist you through the interview process. We will also assist you with rewriting your resume and cover letter. And then maybe Michael, you can talk to a little bit of the technical difference.
Absolutely. So I will say that there's some degree of crossover in the examples we use, and certainly we cover many of the same introductory topics in the Pragmatic kind of open enrollment courses. The fellowship is much more in depth. It is, to be honest, a lot more difficult. And then you also have, that full-time kind of collaborative environment where you're working with us, you're working with each other. And so, it goes deeper in a lot of ways. But also I'll note that for instance, we don't get into distributed computing with Spark. We don't get into TensorFlow and things like that in the standalone courses currently. But we do cover those in great detail in the fellowship.
Another question for Michael. It says, can you share a little bit more on what is expected from the capstone proposal?
Absolutely. So we don't, necessarily expect you to, and certainly don't require you to, or, aren't looking for someone to put together an entire completed project, for this proposal. What I would say is the most important thing with the capstone proposal is going to be identifying like a meaningful question. So this isn't just the same old, like, can I predict stocks based on Reddit reviews? Something we've seen kind of a lot of times before, or, not something like that doesn't have value to someone. And so being able to identify an opportunity, being able to talk about why it matters, being able to say, if we could make this prediction with 10%, more accuracy or 10% greater precision, it would have this impact in the world. Something, sort of quantifying the value, and then some kind of exploratory analysis showing that this seems feasible, it seems promising. We typically see this delivered in, often slides, a Jupyter notebook, sometimes an app. Again, voila, gives us a nice way to kind of make an app, but just by writing a Jupyter notebook. And then in the interview, you will give like a 3-minute presentation along with that. I'm going to pick up one question here as well, which was, are the capstone projects more like industry level projects, data size you deal with, tools you use? Yeah, absolutely. So this is really to, demonstrate your capacity for and like your kind of intuition for industry work. So, using more data is great, using more like business kind of oriented problems with like greater business value is great. And in fact, doing something that is like very useful, but even only, doesn't use really hardcore, it doesn't need to be deep learning, it doesn't need to be anything really overly sophisticated, but that actually does something useful. That's really what we're looking for. If you have all the, the biggest data set in the world and the craziest tools in the world, and you're not predicting anything that matters to anybody, then it's not really, not really what we're looking for. So hopefully that kind of addresses that question.
Switching back to the chat, another question I see is the deadline is January 15th. When do we hear back about the decision? So the deadline for the application is January 15th, and the deadline for the challenge is January 18th. So after that January 18th deadline, then all of our admissions team will review our applications, and we will send out interviews at the end of that week. So after that, after you complete the challenge and the application, then you will, if accepted, will receive an email asking you to schedule an interview. And then from there, then you'll get an acceptance shortly after, at the end of the week after interviews. Another question, fellowship is not available for part-time programs, so we are not offering those full tuition scholarships for the part-time program. They are only eligible for the full-time program. And going back to the Q&A, so when will the program resume in person? I don't think we have a definitive answer for that as of right now. We want to make sure that it's safe for all of our students and all of our staff. We, of course, have a preference to attending in person, so that is definitely the goal, to resume those at some point. But as of right now, until it's safe for everyone to do so, we don't have a definitive timeline. Another question here, can you talk about the interview structure? So they are going to be group interviews. You will present your capstone project proposal that you completed during the challenge section of the application. You'll have about 2 to 3 minutes to present, and you'll provide some exploratory data analysis as well as some visuals for us to review. And then we'll have an admissions team member on the call to ask you some questions about your job search. And maybe Michael can answer a little bit more about what to expect from the technical side of the interview, but it is in a group setting, about 3 to 4 other applicants, and again, about 2 to 3 minutes per applicant.
Yeah, so I'll just say as well, so again, this is it's a short presentation. It's like a 3-minute timer. You can go a little bit over 3 minutes. We ask you 1 or 2 questions afterwards. That's a very short amount of time, we know. It's not just so that we can get through everybody. It's actually because we want to see how much you can you identify, can you communicate the key details very quickly? To that end, I would say practice, practice, practice. It's so easy to shoot for 3 minutes and talk for 10. Speaking from experience, I'm a pretty long-winded person, as you probably can tell already. So that's really what it looks like, is, you want a presentation that really focuses on, this is why this matters. This is, initially what we were able to find. It seems feasible. We can move forward with it, and so forth.
Another question in there is going back to the type of jobs that we see our fellows and scholars placed in. So I'll go back to this slide and we kind of go over it really quickly. So you can see our most commonly placed roles are data scientists, and it's just going down from there. But of course, we've placed other roles. It's just dependent on the hiring partner and their availability at that time. Another question, so do you require the knowledge of Python? And this will be another one I pass to Michael.
Sure. So we see people coming in from various backgrounds. For instance, so I'll say that I think with the exception of one, all of the instructors actually have gone through the fellowship. And when I attended, I had very little experience in Python and a lot of experience in R. So it was an uphill battle for me to make the switch, but I had I did have transferable experience. I had a lot of statistics experience. And so, that's totally something we're okay with. Python is pretty exclusively what we use, but if you have, meaningful experience kind of in other technical programming languages or tools, we see people coming from R, MATLAB, Python, and so forth.
So another question I see in here is there are 2 different ways to join TDI, fellow and scholar. If we are not offered a fellowship, how do we become a scholar? So you'll receive there's no different application process for fellow or scholars. So you'll receive your acceptance from there, and it'll indicate if you've been offered that full tuition scholarship, or if not, it will show that you've been accepted as a scholar, and then your next steps to reserve your spot in our spring cohort.